the anti-Semitic protests, riots, whatever you want to call them, in American universities continue. The universities continue to appease the protesters, and unsurprisingly, the protesters are emboldened by this. Yesterday on the reality show, we talked about this, and we touched on the topic of Shai Davidai, an professor in Columbia University, who had his ID card deactivated by the university as a response to the anti-Semitic attacks. The fact that he is Jewish and from Israel is not something that these people want to see on their campus, assuming many of them are actually students there. And the university is, as clearly as possible, siding with these savages. So we're going to talk a bit more about that today, and what is going on in Columbia University specifically, and how Shai Davidai, unlike the university, is standing up to these protesters, and standing up to the idea that if somebody hates Jews, then you should automatically give them what they want and keep the Jews away from them. Welcome to the Daily Objective, day 200 of the war in Israel. I'm joined by Morgan. Hey, Morgan, your first thoughts on this topic. You were not on the reality show yesterday, right?
Yes, I was.
Yes, you were. Sorry. Too many shows and difficult to remember. But yeah, your thoughts on this, and then we'll go to the first clip from Shai Davidai.
Well, it's much to be expected in the sense of how this has unfolded. What's, I think, taken people by surprise, although, there's a meaningful way in which it shouldn't, is the virulence of the anti-Semitism that's been shown there. And then also the denial of it, which I'll come back to. But, the fact that students go and camp out in various places of campus, which they don't have permission to do, is not normal. It's not unusual. They do that kind of thing fairly regularly. Certainly here in Edinburgh, they do that. They occupy buildings without permission. The faculty or the administration often retroactively sanctions it and lets them do it and doesn't tough them out. But this is the kind of thing they do. However, in terms of the anti-Semitism, it is shocking to see the kind of things which are coming out. The students who were harassed and intimidated by the demonstrators have reported things that were shouted at them, and they are just some of the worst anti-Semitic slurs some of the time. I don't want to foul the air by saying it, but one of the girls put up a video where she's having KIKE shouted at her. And then the professors from NYU I saw, and also from Princeton, are denying that there was any anti-Semitism going on there, and that actually the real problem was Islamophobia being shown by the other side. So there's a huge just denialism which is coming out, and which we've seen throughout the war in the culture more broadly, but which is going on here. And it's a kind of low, dirty racket where the professors teach the students the perspectives which is animating them and which they're demonstrating on the protests, and then use their authority to cover up that any of it's being done, or to deny that any of it's being done, and to demand that they be let go. The Princeton professors were demanding that anyone who was arrested when they were blocking police trucks from leaving, or who were harassing people, or who were just camped out on campus when they didn't have the permission to do it, be released, and that any record of it be expunged from their student records. But it's actually very important that that kind of thing's on their student records. So it's awful what's going on, and unfortunately far too many people are going along with it.
Yeah, before we go to the video, thank you, John, for becoming a YouTube member. There was a few comments in the chat I want to address. So Tom says, I see a major donor has pulled funding from Columbia. Christian says, defund universities. Of course, you would think anybody who is financially supporting these institutions and is, has any basic level of decency would not continue to do so, but they don't need that money. They are financially secure for a very, very long time, unfortunately. There's another comment here. Willful Thinker says, what is with this phenomenon of the threatened party being run off in favor of those posing the threat? Yeah, and it's not just being run off as in, you're outnumbered and you escape for your own safety. It's the authorities, the people in charge, the people whose task is to keep you safe. So I saw a press conference with which had some students from Colombia. One of them said that a student complained that she complained to the university. She or he, I don't remember, was harassed for wearing Jewish symbols and was told, then don't wear those symbols, which is, you imagine the outcry if a woman, was sexually harassed and was then told, well, don't wear, short skirts. This is the equivalent, very much so, but because it's to do with Jews and Jews, when you think Jews, you think Israel, and Israel is violating the rights of the Palestinians or whatever bullshit is being spun as a part of the excuse for anti-Semitism. This makes it okay. All right. I can only imagine, and can't really even do that. The situation that Shai Davidai is going through. Let's watch a clip of him talking to some more sympathetic people in this clip.
We'll call on the governor, Kathy Hochul. You have the National Guard. You have terrorists in a university at New York. That's your state. Bring in the National Guard. Make sure we are going to rid this country of terrorists and terrorist supporters. We believe in love. We believe in free speech. But we believe that enough is enough.
Is that the full clip? There was a part of it before. But yeah, in any case, he is very much at the center of this, and he is at the center of this obviously because he is at Columbia. He's Jewish, and he won't go away, even though he's being that's the demand. Yeah, Morgan, Daniel will check if there's any other parts of this clip. But Morgan, your thoughts?
I mean, just on a small point, I think it might be slightly overkill to bring in the National Guard for this kind of thing, because although we have seen reluctance to confront the protesters from police forces generally in the Western world, the NYPD did come in to Colombia, is my understanding from the reporting, and did arrest some of these people. Now, perhaps not enough is being done, but I would err on the side of saying calling in the National Guard is maybe a bit too much. However, this is a professor who's Jewish, and the other video which we showed yesterday, I think, where when he's complaining in front of a crowd of people who are braying and jeering at him that he was locked out of campus, or had his ID pass deactivated, they have no sympathy for him at all. And what should strike people is the way in which Jewish students and a Jewish professor here are bearing responsibility for a nation which they aren't responsible. If you were to entertain for a second that Israel is generally at fault for something, they aren't responsible for it. They have no part in it. They're in a foreign country, and yet they're treated as if they're culpable because they're Jewish. And how on earth is that justifiable? There was another video of a young man in Hasidic dress yesterday who was being blocked from entering the campus by the protesters. And so what is it in the Western world where people think that they can hold any random Jewish person responsible for the actions of the Israeli government? And how is that not just rank anti-Semitism? They have no answer because they have to evade that question. And I think the logic of it is that, the kind of thing which we've seen, the kind of rank cliche that drops out of people's mouths around this is that, oh, the Jews were oppressed once and now they're the oppressors now. And the worst category in which you can be put is the oppressor. And therefore, almost anything can be done to you or to anyone in that class, because these people don't think in terms of individuals. They think in terms of groups and group dynamics.
Yeah, I have to repeat that with the protesters, first of all, many of them, we kind of jokingly said they sport the fashion, this fashion of looking like the terrorists that they support, and a part of that is having their face covered. And we don't necessarily know that they're students. I'm sure some of them are. I'm almost certain some of them are not, and just see this as a great opportunity take part in things. Christian, thank you for the super chat. Christian says, spoiled brats at universities are, in my opinion, the result of helicopter parents. One woman arrested, killed 2 years ago, a couple through reckless driving, got away with a fine paid by her mother. Your thoughts? I'm not entirely sure I understand. So this woman was arrested in one of the protests and killed a couple through. Yeah, if I don't know, but just generally, yes, I think if there's in terms of the students, those of them who are students who, at the age of 18, 19, what they decide to do is, they're going to university, and what they decide to do is to keep the Jews out because they heard the Jews somewhere are doing, bad things, and they don't have the basic level. There's a lot of things that you can excuse people for doing because they're 18 or 19. Supporting the worst savages on the planet, which is the Palestinians, in their war against the only civilized people in the Middle East, not only supporting them, but being a part of their war by saying we will not have Jews on this campus, and acting towards preventing that. Yeah, that is definitely a failure of the parents in that sense. Morgan.
I think it's wrong to say that it's a result of helicopter parents. I mean, there are definitely a lot of people who are reporting certain individuals from the protests who are from very wealthy backgrounds. There were things about students whose registered address is at properties which cost millions. The girl who was holding a sign saying that Al-Qassam's next targets, with a sign that pointed at some students holding Israeli flags, and Al-Qassam is like the name for the military wing of Hamas. So she's saying that they should be killed by the terrorists. She's apparently from a very wealthy family. Ilhan Omar's daughter is there.
Wait, so with that girl, I saw the video of the girl holding the sign. Do they know who she is? Because one thing I thought was her face was covered, and if anybody thinks I'm promoting violence here, so be it. But I would think it would be okay to just go and take that thing off her face and see who she actually is, because she is calling for terrorist attacks against Jews very, very clearly.
I mean, certainly, I would think the police would do something about that. But in terms of the covering, people on the internet, sleuthing as they do, found pictures of a girl who's involved in the protests whose face is uncovered, and I don't think they know for sure it's her, but the face and the hair looks very, very distinctly like this girl. So it seems reasonably likely that it's her. Ilhan Omar's daughter was, I think, turfed out of her accommodation or something like that and put on academic probation something, and is complaining that she's hungry and has nowhere to live, something like that. But all that, I think, the kids coming from wealthy backgrounds is besides the point. Students for centuries have always been a well-off bunch of people, typically. It's only in the last 100 years or so that working class students have been able to attend universities. So the real source of student radicalism is ideas, and that needs to be very clear, because you could if you were to think about it, you could take out the variable of helicopter parenting and privilege and all this stuff, and these students would still be doing what they're doing. So I don't think that's the primary thing that's causing this in any way.
Yeah. So Christian clarifies that the student he was talking about, he puts her name in the chat. I don't know if she deserves this publicity, but actually maybe she does. Where is it? Isabel Jennifer Seward was arrested, and she's the one who killed people in a car accident and through reckless driving, and got away with it with a fine. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Jonathan, for the super chat. Let's play the rest of that clip, which I think is most of it is an earlier part of the clip, right? So we can stop it when we get to the part about the governor.
Last night, what you saw at Columbia University is open support for Hamas, holding signs saying Al-Qassam Brigade, your next target, pointing at Jewish students. So here you have it. While U.S. citizens are being held hostage in Gaza, by Hamas and by the Islamic Jihad, you have students at Columbia University and faculty at Columbia University who are cheering on Hamas. They are denying, and the administration, Columbia's administration, not only won't do anything about it, they are refusing to let the NYPD in. They are letting the terrorists in and keeping the NYPD out. So my message is not to the cowards at Columbia's administration. My message is to the mayor. We don't need your empty remarks about not being okay. Right now, we are not okay. Do something. And if you can't do, if the Mayor Eric Adams, if you can't do something, one, we'll make sure you vote you out or impeach you. And we'll call on the governor, Kathy Hochul.
Right. Yeah, I don't necessarily agree with everything he said here as well, towards the end, but the points that he's making are very important. People are openly supporting Hamas, openly calling for more terrorist attacks like October 7th on Jews by Hamas, and the university is, if not endorsing it, letting it happen, which is a form of endorsement. And the things this could lead to at some point, New York is the city with the highest Jewish population in the world, more than any city in Israel. And at some point, people will say, well, we have a reason to be afraid, and not just because we have people who are targeting us, but because the police won't do anything, and the universities are siding with them. We need to get together. This is what happens in anarchy. You will have, if you don't have, a monopoly on the use of force by the government, a monopoly that is actually, in not just in theory, but in practice as well, you will have different gangs, not necessarily wrongly so, just getting together and saying, we're going to defend ourselves. At some point, if Jews are fair game, basically, if that is the unstated but apparently official policy of the authorities, then they will have to find a way to defend themselves, which is not something that anybody should want to see.
Yes, and part of the reason why administrations typically are very reluctant to do anything is, one, because they're afraid to do very much, because if they clamp down on student activism in any way, then that sort of comes back on them in many respects, usually from people within their own faculty or the student body, but also from the wider public that tends to get viewed very poorly. But also because there's a hypocrisy. The universities teach a lot of these ideas, not only around Israel-Palestine, but around methods of direct action. I remember being sat in a first-year philosophy class where the issue of sit-ins and direct action and protests came up, and it's taught as something which is perfectly right and moral to do a lot of the time. And literally it was coming from the I think it was a PhD candidate who was teaching the class, and it washed over the whole classroom and no one blinked anything about it. And it's not like that it's part of a debate or a discussion or something. It's just taken carte blanche, as is so often the case, was my experience at university. If there was ever a professor who raised their head to disagree with a lot of these prevailing ideas that were being spoken about, I remember you could hear a pin drop, and everyone shifted uncomfortably in their seats because they weren't sure about what was being said. So the universities are culpable, but the administrations are culpable for the things that they're allowing to be taught, or to be taught unchallenged. And it's no wonder that the students end up coming out like this, because how could they be coming out otherwise? It's a minority of students who go and do and think independently, which is not the kind of culture that's encouraged, who would disagree, and that's always going to be a minority.
Thank you, Jonathan, in case I didn't thank you yet, and thank you, Bonnie, for the super chats. Christian adds later on, for me, helicopter parenting also means that parents always side with their children, even if they have done something awful, and so they are sheltered from responsibility. Yes, and part of that is, if your kids did something wrong, certainly at a young age, you as a parent are responsible. And if you defend them, you're kind of saying, well, maybe I didn't do as bad a job as I know I did as a parent. And of course, to the extent that these are students in their late teens, uh, in every case, of course, they are personally responsible, but in every case, I still hold the parents at least somewhat responsible. You can't be a great parent and have your 18, 19-year-old take part in something like this.
Well, look, I still disagree. I mean, students go in and they get radicalized by the ideas. Now, I appreciate people aren't going to disagree about the importance of ideas here, but again, you could take out that factor. You could have someone be a really good parent, and maybe it would make some of this stuff less likely. But the students go in, they learn that we live in some of the worst cultures in the world, which are oppressive and racist and inherently violent, and that they need to use violence in return, and that Israel is a genocidal apartheid, state, all this kind of stuff, right? And so it's just a logical outcome that they act like this, no matter how good the parents are. And also, and again, kids have free will. You could be the best parent in the world and still have a serial killer ultimately.
So, I mean, being a good parent isn't just putting a roof over your child's head and making sure they're well fed and everything. It does involve teaching them how to think. If they go off to university and within a year, some professor, however charismatic they may be, convince them that what Hamas did on October 7th, that's a good thing. Yeah, that has to be a failure of, in some place, a failure of the parents, I think.
I just disagree. I mean, so I have a twin sister. So my sister and I were in the same context, and I had very good parents broadly. My sister's she might see this. She's a terrible person. She's really awful. And so it's because she chose to be like that. And I chose to be otherwise. I'm not saying that because I'm just so amazing, but just I'm certainly better than she is. And I appreciate the parenting and all this kind of stuff, teaching the right kind of values and ways to think. That is all important. But I don't think it's a major factor in what we're seeing here.
All right. Well, I still disagree, but that might be a whole topic for a debate sometime in the future. I do want to read this tweet, or at least much of it. It's a long tweet by Shai Davidai, and again, they say retweets are not endorsements. Reading this tweet is also not an endorsement of everything he says, but it has important information, and I think the sentiment is very much, on point. So he says, I want to send a public message to Mr. Cass Holloway, the COO of Columbia University. Cass, you're a really great guy. I know it. I saw it in your eyes today. This is why I know that deep down, you know I'm right. You may not like my style, but I know you agree with almost everything that I have been saying. I just know it. I'm still trying to understand how you could just stand there, look me in the eyes, and not let me into campus. How could you keep a straight face when you capitulated to the pro-Hamas mob, yet refused entry to the most vocal voice for the Jewish and Israeli students, staff, and faculty at Columbia? I think I know how. You were just doing your job. You were just doing your job when you denied a Jewish professor access to campus. By the way, all I wanted to do was to read the names of the 133 hostages. Thanks for asking. You were just doing your job when you sided with those that support Hamas. You were just doing your job when you couldn't say for a full minute whether Hamas is a terrorist organization. Remember that meeting? It's all recorded. You were just doing your job. Look, I get it. You're scared. You're worried about how the pro-Hamas extremists and the brainwashed cult they've amassed will react if you try to disperse them. But that's exactly how terrorism works. It's an ideology that forces you to act in certain ways through explicit and implicit threats. Hamas doesn't need to bomb all the buses in Israel for me to still be scared of riding a bus in Tel Aviv. It's the same at Columbia. At this point, the pro-Hamas mob at Columbia has broken basically every possible rule of the university and possibly multiple state and federal laws. The NYPD has stated that they are ready to act, and if President Shafiq lets them in. And you're the person who needs to make that call. That is damn scary. But being scared is not an excuse for not doing the right thing. Being scared is not an excuse for choosing the pro-Hamas mob and their violent chants over the Jewish professor who believes in coexistence. The problem is that you're not alone. There are thousands of administrators like you all over the US, all over US campuses who are also scared. Like you, they want to stay out of it. Like you, they are just doing their jobs. And there were millions of Germans like you in the 1930s. Good Germans, upstanding Germans, were just doing their jobs. Who do you think ran the universities of Berlin and Munich and Heidelberg and Frankfurt in the 1930s? Who helped the Hitler Youth check out books by Jewish authors to burn outside of campus? Administrators, just like you. Then I'm not going to read the rest, although it doesn't go on for much longer. I think that's the powerful part. Then he has his suggestions, but the comparison to 1930s Germany is one that we've made on this channel. I think appropriately, Shai Davidai makes it very, very eloquently. This is exactly the kind of things that happened, and people have been sharing the images that are exactly the same of students holding hands, preventing Jews from entering campus. So I think what we've seen in recent days, and again, what we've seen, unfortunately, from the authorities is such a clear situation, such a clear example of where we are that, if nothing is done quickly to change the path that we're going, very bad things will happen.
Yes, I agree. And I would just say to everyone, what are you going to do about it? Are you just going to do nothing and let this slip by? Because he was saying about, I'm not sure, I can't remember exactly who it was. He was saying that he sort of looked into his eyes and saw he was a good guy. Was it the president? I'm not sure.
It was the COO who he apparently had a meeting with.
Okay. Like there are good professors in university. They're fewer and fewer, but they do exist. And I've met them. Even the chancellor of the university here in Edinburgh, there's a guy called Peter Matheson. I know some of the professors, and Peter Matheson disagree with all of this kind of radicalism and hate it and would really like to see it gone from their universities. However, I have to say that they're weak about it. They feel like their hands are tied and they're not going to put up a fight because the students are all just kind of this far from campaigning to get them gone from their jobs anyway. And they don't want to put up a fight. So they'll do something behind the scenes here and there. They'll, just a little bit, but they won't do too much. And so there's part of the reason why the students are able to do this is not just the radical professors, but the professors who are better don't want to speak out. Now, Shai Davidai is doing that, and that's great. But the guy, the administrations who are people in the administrations and the faculties who are better are also weak. And that's something that has to change.
Yeah, and to wrap up, I see a comment by Jonathan Honig in the chat about a comment Peikoff made, which I don't remember, but he says, remember Peikoff's comment about the 3 dangers of college: drug addiction, depression, and going to class. Yeah, I think number 3 is the one maybe most difficult to get over. And part of these students' indoctrination is it's the Palestinian propaganda machine that we've talked about on this channel, and how it works, what it produces, and how it distributes their misinformation and disinformation. I think it's also the values. It's mostly the values that underlie how they look at these facts. But yeah, Jonathan clarifies that he's paraphrasing what Peikoff said, but that it sounds well in the paraphrased version as well. But yeah, those arguments, the fact that they are false is relevant to this discussion, and we've talked about many of them. We're going to talk about as many of them as possible in 1 hour, in a 1 hour time frame, starting in a couple of minutes. On the reality show, we are going to go through, we're going to debunk the biggest pro-Palestinian lies. Make sure you tune into that. And Morgan, that's the one you're not on. That's what my confusion was at the beginning of the episode. You're on Monday, you're not on Tuesday. Yeah. Lots of shows, but it's good that we have lots of shows. I think it's necessary. Thanks, Morgan. Thanks, everybody, for watching. We'll see you in a couple of minutes on the reality show.
Bye-bye.